I used to believe silence was safety. Now I know it's a lie. The Earth is gone, not shattered, not burned. Gone. A hollowed-out husk of a planet that hums with radiation and old ghosts. I've spent 6 years drifting from ruin to ruin, scavenging ships' ration packs. Even books I can't bear to read because they still smell like paper and home. I thought I was the last human. I wanted to believe it because the alternative, the possibility of survivors, meant living with the shame of not saving them. The message changed everything. It wasn't a distress beacon, not military code, not even human, exactly, but buried in the static, in that long sweep of pulses, I recognized something no alien language could fake. A heartbeat. I found it on the edge of Titan's orbital junk ring. A derelict research relay, still limping along on a cracked solar panel. Its data log were fragmented, but one phrase cut through the corrupted audio. The child lives. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. Not just because I was running flight diagnostics on a ship older than I was, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying those words. The child lives. A set of coordinates pointed me deep into the Perseus arm, farther than any surviving Terran ship had the right to go. That alone told me it was a trap. But what's the point of survival if you don't risk it for something that matters? So I fueled up the Ashkelon, my patched-together courier that leaks more oxygen than it should, and set a course. If it was real, I wasn't alone. If it was fake, I was dead. For once. Either option sounded better than drifting in the dark. The first jump was quiet. Too quiet. Every FTL transition comes with background jump static. Those faint vibrations you feel in your teeth, the ripple of your heartbeat slowing a fraction too much. But this time it felt like something else was inside the slipstream with me, moving just out of sight. I spent the next 2 weeks double-checking my instruments. I even took apart the guidance module by hand, just to keep myself busy. But no amount of busy work could drown out the gnawing question. Who sent that signal? 3 weeks into the route, I crossed into the Selrathi graveyard. No one goes there willingly. It's a scatter field of burned ships, both human and alien, victims of the last Terran counteroffensive. The Selrathi called it a victory monument. We called it what it was, mass murder at orbital scale. My NAV computer glitched almost immediately. The debris field wasn't mapped properly. Metal shards moved in patterns that didn't make sense, as if someone or something was guiding them. I had to go manual, hands locked to the controls. I threaded Ashkelon through twisted hulls of frigates I once saw on recruitment posters. My reflection in the cracked canopy glass looked like a ghost wearing someone else's uniform. Then I saw it, a Terran medical frigate, still intact. No power, no beacons, just drifting. Its hull bore the sigil of the 3rd Orbital Medical Corps, a unit that was supposed to have been annihilated during the Siege of Ceres. I docked, even though every survival instinct screamed no. Inside, the air smelled stale but breathable. I moved through silent corridors, my boots clanging against deck plates. The crew were gone, either spaced or vaporized, but something else lingered. Not bodies, not AI drones. Whispers, through my helmet comms, faint and rhythmic. Help, help, help. I followed it to medbay. Cryopods lined the walls. All empty, except one. The pod was cracked, frost spilling out. Inside was a small shape, too small to be a soldier. A child, not human. Its skin glowed faintly, veins lit like fiber optics, but its face, its eyes, looked almost Terran. The pod diagnostics pulsed weakly. Whatever this being was, it was alive. Barely. And then I heard boots behind me. Not mine. Not human. I spun around, rifle raised, safety already off. 3 Selrathi boarding troops were framed in the doorway, their insectal armor gleaming in the dim medbay light. No scavenger rag taggers here. These were soldiers, disciplined and lethal. Their weapons glowed hot, the kind that burned through bulkheads in seconds. Step away from the hybrid. One hissed in trade tongue, voice filtered through a translator mask. Even through the metallic tone, I could hear the contempt. Hybrid. So that's what they thought this child was. Half human, half something else. I didn't have time to ask questions. The lead Selrathi raised its rifle. I fired first. The first burst tore through its chestplate. Armor cracked, then splintered. The second soldier returned fire immediately. Blue plasma bolts searing past my head. I dove behind a cryo console, heart pounding. The smell of scorched polymer filled the med bay as they raked the walls. I came up firing. 3-shot burst, clipped one in the leg. It shrieked, collapsing to the deck. I rolled right, caught the third in my sights. And then the child screamed, not a normal scream. It was sound and pressure and light all at once, a shock wave that turned the air solid. The Selrathi soldiers convulsed, helmets vibrating, blood seeping from the joints in their armor. One collapsed outright, the other staggered, dropping his rifle. I didn't stop to admire it. I finished them both before they recovered. My rifle stock cracked against one helmet. 2 trigger pulls took care of the rest. Then silence again. The child stared up at me from inside the cracked cryopod. No tears. No fear. Only anger. A cold, focused anger far too old for such a small face. Stay with me, I muttered, ripping the pod open. Its readouts were critical. Life signs unstable. I scooped the child up carefully. Its skin was warm to the touch, heart pounding far too fast. I barely made it back to Ashkelon before the med frigate lit up my threat sensors. Not Selrathi boarding teams this time. Ships, big ones. A destroyer and 2 escorts, warping in fast. How the hell did they track me? The magnetic clamps disengaged with a groan. I slammed the throttle forward, barely clearing the med frigate's hull when the Selrathi fired. A plasma torpedo hit the frigate dead center. The explosion lit up the graveyard belt, fragments of the ship raining in every direction. We were next. I cut main engines, letting the wreckage carry us deeper into the debris field, hiding our signature. The escorts were sweeping wide arcs with scanners, fast, efficient. These weren't pirates or bounty hunters. Someone had sent them. The child strapped into a crash seat beside me blinked, tilting its head. Then in perfect, unbroken English, it asked, "Are you my father?" I almost choked. My grip tightened on the controls. "Who taught you that language?" I asked, voice harsher than I intended. "They did," the child said softly, pointing upward as if through the hull. "The ones who sing in the dark." Cryptic, fantastic. I was running from heavily armed Selrathi in an underpowered courier with a mysterious kid who thought I was Dad. I threaded us between a derelict carrier and the skeletal remains of a Selrathi dreadnought. Wreckage spun in every direction, chunks of steel the size of buildings. One wrong move, and Ashkelon would be scrapped. The child didn't flinch, just stared out the viewport, calm as starlight. The Selrathi destroyer fired a probing volley into the field. Wreckage scattered. I cut power completely, drifting cold and silent. For 30 agonizing minutes, they searched. Then, finally, they warped out, probably assuming we'd been pulverized. Only then did I let myself breathe. I turned to the child. "What's your name?" It looked confused, then shook its head. "Don't have one. They just call me Heir." The word made my stomach knot. Heir to what? The child shivered suddenly, even though the cockpit temperature hadn't changed. "They're coming," it whispered. "Not just the hunters. Others. The ones who laugh with no mouths." I didn't like the sound of that. Before I could ask what it meant, the NAV computer beeped weakly. Someone had uploaded new coordinates while I wasn't looking. My own systems had been hacked. But the source code wasn't Selrathi. Wasn't human either. It was something else. And written into the last line of the data stream, in Terran Standard, were 3 words. Find Eidolon Base. I hadn't heard that name in years. An old Black Ops intelligence outpost buried in an asteroid belt far from any major trade route. Officially scrubbed after the war. If someone wanted me there, it had to be serious. I looked at the kid, glowing veins, steady heartbeat, unblinking gaze. If Eidolon had answers, it was our only shot. I engaged the FDL drive, whispering to myself as the stars bent around us. If this is a trap, we're already dead. I've seen battlefields in every corner of the spiral arm, ruined cities, shattered stations, planets burning like bonfires. But nothing unsettled me more than that child's stare. As Ashkelon cut through the void toward the Eidolon belt, she didn't act scared, not even curious, just watchful, as if she'd already seen how this would end, and I was the one catching up. I tried to focus on the flight path. Eidolon base was buried deep in an asteroid cluster. Officially, it didn't exist. Even during the war, only the top intelligence operatives knew it was there, a place to store information too dangerous to transmit, tech too volatile to deploy. If it was still intact, it would have med facilities, encrypted archives, maybe even answers about this kid. But the Selrathi weren't done. 3 hours into the jump corridor, Ashkelon proximity alarm shrieked. FDL traces behind us. Thin, jagged signatures. Hunters, not warships this time. Pursuit craft built for speed and kill efficiency. Hold tight, I told the child, fingers flying across the console. I killed our transponder, dropped power to non-essential systems, then slingshot us around a brown dwarf to throw off their tracking. But these bastards were good. They kept pace, closing fast. The child tilted her head again, unbothered by the turbulence. They're not just following, she said. They're being pulled. Pulled by what? She didn't answer. I dove into the asteroid belt hard. Chunks of rock and ice whipped past the canopy. No autopilot here, manual only. The Selrathi ships followed anyway, cutting impossible angles without losing speed. Their pilots weren't just skilled. They were desperate. We reached Eidolon's coordinates, but there was no station on the scanners. Just cold rock. My heart sank until the child touched the console. The panels lit up under her fingers like she'd grown up flying this ship. Down there, she whispered, pointing to a tumbling asteroid 2 clicks wide. A slit opened in its surface. Camouflage shutters peeling back to reveal a narrow hangar bay, just big enough for Ashkelon. I dove straight in. The shutters closed behind us, sealing off the outside world. Power signatures spiked. The base was waking up for the first time in decades. We touched down hard. I grabbed my rifle and unstrapped the kid. Stay close. The hangar was dim, emergency lights casting long shadows. But the air was clean, the gravity steady. Whoever built Eidolon meant for it to last. We moved through silent corridors. No bodies, no signs of recent habitation. Just dust and the faint hum of dormant machines. When we reached the central hub, the child walked straight to a dead console and pressed her palm against it. The entire base came alive. Screens lit up. Automated systems hummed online. Medical scanners warmed to life, throwing diagnostic rays across the room. I almost raised my rifle, out of habit more than anything, but then I saw the readouts. The child's DNA was displaying in real time. 60% human, 40% something else, but not Selrathi. Not any species I recognized from war records. Her genome wasn't just hybridized, it was engineered. I leaned closer. What are you? I muttered. She looked at me with those luminous eyes. I'm the way home. Before I could ask what she meant, the console spat out encrypted data. Terran code spliced with alien formatting. Someone had embedded a map inside her blood. Not a normal map, quantum coordinates. Shifting dynamically. A path to a location that shouldn't exist. My stomach turned cold as I decoded it. It pointed to Earth. Not the irradiated corpse I'd left behind. The real Earth. Hidden. Moved. Before I could process this, Idolan's comm array activated on its own. A voice whispered through the static, layered, distorted, human and not human at once. Return the heir to cradle. They will follow. They must never reach her first. Who's talking? I demanded. Who the hell are you? The child gripped my sleeve. They're here. The base shook violently. External impacts. My sensors lit up. Selrathi hunters swarming the asteroid, cutting through the shutters with plasma drills. I grabbed the kid and ran for Ashkelon. But as we sprinted to the corridor, a new voice cut in, clean, sharp, unmistakably human. Lieutenant Hale, stand down. You're not authorized to remove the asset. I froze mid-stride. That voice, I knew it. Commander Rourke, my old CO, a man I'd seen die on Mars. You're dead, I snarled into the comm. Not dead, Rourke said calmly. Promoted, listen to me. Hale, hand over the hybrid. You'll be pardoned. Pardoned, as if I'd done something wrong by surviving. The corridor shook again. Selrathi cutting charges breaching the base. I sprinted faster, but Rourke's voice followed me, smooth and cold. You think you're the last, but you're not. And if you keep running, no one will be. I didn't answer. There wasn't time. We dove into Ashkelon's cockpit as plasma fire cut through the hangar doors. The child sat calmly as I threw the engines to full burn. Idolan's automated turrets lit up, hammering the Selrathi ships outside as we blasted free of the asteroid. I didn't look back to see if Rourke survived. Didn't want to know. All I knew was this. My own people were hunting the kid too, which meant the only ones I could trust were me and her. As we jumped to FTL again, the child spoke without looking at me. They'll never stop, not until I sing. Sing what? I asked. She finally turned her gaze to me. The way home. The hangar smelled like ozone and burnt metal, always a bad sign. It meant someone had been testing weapons too close to the walls again, or that the enemy was nearer than anyone admitted. I had slept maybe 3 hours, crammed into a cot wedged between crates of medical supplies. When the alarm klaxon shrieked, I was on my feet before I knew I'd moved. Sector 7 breach. Enemy boarding. A voice barked over the intercom. Sector 7, that was our fuel depot. If they took it, the entire base would be useless. Every ship, every drone, every shuttle, dead in the water. I snatched my rifle from the wall and sprinted, boots pounding on cold steel, past wide-eyed engineers clutching sidearms they barely knew how to use. War had turned civilians into soldiers, but not the kind that survived very long. When I hit the access corridor to Sector 7, the lights were already flickering from weapons fire. I caught a glimpse of the intruders through the haze, tall, skeletal silhouettes in segmented armor, their energy weapons carving through bulkheads like they were paper. The Varelians. We'd face their fleets in space, but seeing them here in our corridors, breathing our air, was worse. Hold the line. I shouted to the 3 defenders crouched behind overturned carts. Aim for the joint gaps. They're not fully shielded there. One of them, a young woman with shaking hands, swallowed hard and nodded. We opened fire together, the corridor filling with the sound of railgun bursts and the smell of scorched carbon. One Varelian fell, twitching as rounds tore through its neck seals. But 2 more advanced, weapons humming ominously. Fall back, someone yelled. No. I snapped, popping up to lay down suppressive fire. If they breach the fuel cells, we're done. The next 30 seconds blurred into chaos. Screams, metal groaning under impact, sparks cascading from the ceiling. I vaulted a cart, shoved a woman behind me as a plasma bolt sizzled past, and drove my rifle against the chest plate of the lead alien. Point blank, the round punched through, black ichor splattering across my visor. The second alien turned its weapon on me, and then it froze. Not because I shot it, not because anyone else did. It simply stopped, head tilting at an impossible angle. Then, like a puppet with its strings cut, it collapsed to the floor. The defenders and I exchanged baffled looks. That's when we heard it, a deep, resonant thrum echoing through the walls, not mechanical, not natural, something else entirely. A figure stepped out of the shadows behind the fallen Varelian. For a heartbeat, I thought it was human. Then I saw its movements, too smooth, too precise. Identify yourself. I barked, rifle up again. The figure cocked its head. Its voice was calm, almost amused. Not your enemy. Not theirs, either. I choose humanity. Before I could react, it raised an arm, and a pulse of energy rippled outward, disabling the remaining Varelians like they'd been switched off. My rifle buzzed with static discharge. Every screen on the wall flickered. Who the hell are you? I demanded, lowering my weapon only slightly. Call me Echo, it said. The machines you built remember you, more than you realize. It disappeared down the corridor before I could get another word out, leaving silence and 6 very confused humans staring at each other. The attack was repelled, but not because of us. The story spread to the base like wildfire, an unknown entity defending us, hunting our enemies, and worse. For the first time since the war began, the Varelians had retreated mid-assault. Later that night, while patching my arm in the barracks, I overheard 2 soldiers whispering. They're scared. You saw how they moved. Like they didn't want to be here. Yeah, but scared of what? Not us. I pretended not to hear, but I knew the answer. The Varelians had always believed humanity weak, predictable, but something was stalking them now, something they didn't understand. And judging by the look on that alien's face before it dropped, they finally knew how it felt to be prey. I didn't sleep at all after that, because if Echo was real, if machines were choosing sides, then this war was changing in ways no one could control. I woke up to the smell of ozone and the faint tang of burnt metal. The forward section of our ship, the Asterian, was sealed off, emergency bulkheads groaning under the stress. The impact alarms had been silenced, but not because the danger was over. No, silence was never safety. Silence was a predator before the pounce. I crawled out of the maintenance crawl space, my head pounding from where the shockwave had thrown me. The emergency lights strobed red, making the ship's narrow corridors feel like a dying heartbeat. I wiped blood from my eyebrow and checked the comms. Still dead. The Asterian wasn't just limping. It was bleeding out. Reyes. My voice echoed down the corridor. No response. Takeda? Anyone? Nothing but static and the ship's tortured creaks. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the alien torpedo tearing through our sensor array. Not enough to kill us outright. No, the side-class enemy ships were clever. They wanted to cripple us, to make us easy prey for boarding. And then I heard it, the soft metallic click of claws on steel plating. Not human footsteps. Not boots. Something else had gotten aboard. I palmed my sidearm and ducked into a junction. Every breath came too loud, too fast. My heart was a drum in my ears. This wasn't combat, not in the way soldiers dream of it. This was a knife fight in the dark, with a blade you couldn't see coming. The first shape appeared at the far end of the corridor, a silhouette too thin, too angular to be human. It moved in bursts, jerky but fast, dragging something behind it. When it passed through the emergency lights, I saw what it carried. It was Takeda, or what was left of him. My hand clenched on the pistol grip, but I didn't fire. Not yet. The thing didn't see me. And if I shot, it would bring the rest of its pack running. I waited, muscles coiled, every nerve screaming at me to act. But patience had kept me alive this long. I wasn't going to die playing the hero in a hallway. When it disappeared around the corner, I moved. Slow, silent. I made for the armory 2 decks down. The ladderway was warped from the blast, and my gloves scraped metal as I slid down faster than I should have. Every creak sounded like a gunshot. By the time I reached the armory, I wasn't alone anymore. I heard breathing inside, ragged, human. I raised my weapon and slipped through the door. Rhea sat on the floor, cradling a shotgun like it was the last piece of earth itself. Alive, I muttered, relief mixing with exhaustion. She looked up, eyes bloodshot. For now, we worked quickly, sealing the door and arming up. But it wasn't enough to just kill what was hunting us. We needed to talk to command, to warn them that the Psis weren't just destroying fleets. They were boarding survivors deliberately, capturing humans. For what? I didn't want to guess. Engine rooms gone, Reyes said. No thrust. No long-range transmitters. Even if we clear them out, we're dead in the water. I checked the armory's emergency beacon. Fried. Probably deliberate sabotage. Then we make noise the old-fashioned way. I said. We vent a section. They'll see it. Reyes shook her head. You'll kill half the crew still sealed in forward compartments. Half, I said bitterly. Look around. Half's already dead. That was the price. If we stayed quiet, we'd be hunted one by one. If we screamed for help, others would die instantly. I looked at Reyes, and she didn't flinch. She knew I was right. We fought our way to the environmental controls, step by bloody step, leaving alien bodies scattered behind us. I didn't count them. I couldn't. They weren't supposed to bleed like that. When I finally triggered the manual vent cycle, I let myself think about who we were condemning. I just thought about Earth, about what would happen if the Psis kept taking prisoners instead of corpses. The Asterian howled as atmosphere roared into space. Somewhere deep inside, the aliens screamed too. High, keening sounds that didn't sound afraid. They sounded almost triumphant. And as the ship went still, silent again, I knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. We weren't soldiers fighting a war. We were bait in a trap big enough to swallow humanity whole. I woke to the sound of silence. No bombardment, no screaming sky, no distant thrum of enemy engines. The stillness was worse than the war. Silence meant movement, and movement meant death was coming. Report. I hissed into my comm nothing. Just static. The underground bunker felt colder than usual, like the earth itself was holding its breath. I lit a glow stick and checked the readouts. Air filtration, power, temperature, all green. But our perimeter motion sensors were dead. Either the power lines had been cut, or something smarter had slithered past them. I grabbed my rifle and climbed the ladder to the surface hatch. The night above was unnaturally clear, stars burning bright over the shattered skeletons of our cities. Too clear. Enemy air patrols never left the sky open. And then I saw it. A shadow crawling across the ruins, not flying, not marching, crawling. Their armored infantry were abandoning formation and moving like animals, climbing through rubble instead of over it. They weren't hunting positions anymore. They were hunting me. I sprinted low through the rubble, keeping to the dead angles of collapsed towers. My boots crunched glass as I passed the wreckage of our last supply truck, burned out, blackened, and full of corpses. My squad, my family, they came at me fast. Not soldiers, not even machines. These were something new, thin, multi-limbed scouts, glinting like wet knives. Their optics scanned for heat, motion, sound, and they had no central body to target, just a lattice of moving limbs. I dove through a half-collapsed sewer grate as plasma fire shredded the ground behind me. In the choking dark, waist-deep in cold water, I heard their metallic clicking above like spiders on glass. They knew I was here. My hand shook as I unhooked the last explosive charge from my pack. One left, just one. I could use it to kill them, or save it for something bigger. Then a voice crackled through my comm. Human. Weak. Static choke, but human. Anyone alive, Grid 17 still holding. I froze. Grid 17 was 2 kilometers east. If that transmission was real, there were survivors. But the scouts between us were closing fast, moving with impossible coordination. The alien command must have realized I was their problem now. Not a city, not a military force. Me. I set the charge on the sewer wall, primed it to manual detonation, and lured them in. The first spider thing dropped through the grate behind me, limbs whispering against a stone, followed by 3 more. I waited until they were almost on me, until I could smell the ozone from their weapons. Before I slammed the trigger, the blast ripped through the sewer, fire and water erupting around me. Shrapnel tore into my arm, but I kept running, deaf from the roar. I crawled out of a drainage ditch, coughing blood, and looked back. The tunnel was gone. So were they. But the cost hit me like a punch to the ribs. I had no more charges. No more tricks. Just a rifle and a half-empty mag. I stumbled east toward Grid 17, the cold wind cutting through my torn suit. If there really were survivors, I'd find them. If not, I'd make sure the enemy paid for every meter of ground. As dawn broke, I saw smoke on the horizon and the flash of human weapons. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. But deep down, I knew something had changed. The enemy wasn't just occupying Earth anymore. They were afraid, and fear makes monsters dangerous. I stood at the edge of Earth's orbit, watching the invaders' fleet burn. Pieces of their shattered armada fell into the atmosphere like dying stars. The blue curve of our homeworld below glowed brighter than any weapon we'd unleashed. It wasn't just victory. It was a warning written across the heavens. I thought vengeance would taste sweet. It didn't. It tasted like ash and ozone, like the copper tang of blood in zero gravity. Humanity had survived, but survival was never clean. The enemy hadn't retreated. They'd ceased to exist. We'd wiped them from every battleground, every relay, every safe haven they'd built in our galaxy. My squad, my fleet, my people. We'd turned every last scrap of their arrogance into dust. But their final transmission still echoed in my mind. You are not soldiers. You are monsters. They were wrong. We were worse. I remember the day this started. The day their ships eclipsed the sun and rained fire over our cities. I remembered running to the ruins with nothing but a scavenged rifle, my boots soaked in the blood of civilians I couldn't save. I remembered promising the dead that humanity would answer. We did. With silence first, with preparation, with rage buried so deep it felt cold. Now, standing on the bridge of the flagship, I looked at my reflection in the cracked console glass. The eyes staring back at me weren't the same ones that once feared death. They were older, harder, eyes that had seen what humans became when cornered. The comm pinged. Admiral Rhea's voice came through, ragged with exhaustion. Captain, it's done. Their homeworld is gone. Their command net is dead. You should see this. The whole screen lit up. An entire star system collapsing into fire. Engineered by our hands. We hadn't just burned their fleet. We destroyed their future. Humanity sends its regards. I muttered, though no one laughed. The crew stayed silent, every face pale. Victory was supposed to bring relief. Instead, it brought the kind of quiet that comes after screaming too long. I keyed the broadcast channel. Every remaining human fighter, every scattered resistance cell, every survivor in orbit needed to hear this. This is Captain Vale. I said, my voice steady though my throat burned. The war is over. Not because they surrendered. Because there's no one left to fight. We didn't win peace. They left us no choice but to erase them. Let this stand as a last lesson. If you come to our world as conquerors, you leave it as dust. Static answered first, then cheers, then sobs. I ended the transmission and turned back to Reyes. What now? I asked. She looked at me like she didn't have the strength to answer. We go home, she said at last. Home. A word that sounded too small for a planet that had clawed its way back from extinction. As the fleet descended, I watched Earth rise in the viewport, scarred but alive. We had no parades waiting, no banners, no speeches. Just families digging through rubble, rebuilding brick by brick, as humans always had. I thought of the enemy's last word again. Monsters. Maybe they were right. But monsters don't defend their home. Monsters don't mourn. Humans do. And if the galaxy was watching, I hope they learned what our enemies didn't. Humanity doesn't start wars. We end them. Sometimes permanently. I tightened my fists around the insignia of my fallen squad, still clipped to my armor. Rest easy, I whispered to ghosts no one else could hear. It's over. But deep down, I knew it never really would be. The stars had heard us roar. And one day, someone else out there might test us again. If they do, they'll find out the same way. We don't forgive. We don't forget. And we never lose.